Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Radio Dead Air Tech Q&A. You've got questions. We've got guesses. I'm Nash. I've been doing Radio Dead Air for ever. But in addition to that, I'm also an IT professional. With me, as always, my producer, Mike Gearman, who's also in IT. If you have tech questions for us, you can send those to requests at radiodeadair.com. Or if you're watching us on YouTube, just drop those in the comments on the YouTube page. A little bit of a different deal tonight. This is part one of our holiday build guides. If you are unfamiliar, what we do every time around this time of year, coming up on the holiday gift buying season, is we give ourselves a price limit on 3 tiers of computer builds.
The inexpensive budget build.
Budget build.
A mid-range.
Yeah, we call that the mainstream build.
Yeah. And then the stupid build.
The stupid, no limit, and if we had all the money in the world, what we would build. Now, the point
if I won Powerball tomorrow, what would I build?
Yeah. Now, the point of this is we're trying to give you an idea of what the best you can get for your money is. And if you're not going for a full PC build, maybe some ideas for upgrades tonight's going to be kind of the affordable one. Now, that being said, even though I increased last year before, we had a $600 limit. This year, I increased the limit to $650.
Yeah.
And like when we started doing this, it was $500, and we could get a lot for $500.
And now it feels like we're getting less
for
$650. But it feels like that. Now, that said, if you look at capability increases in parts, it's not necessarily less. It just feels like less.
Now, we both had to make a lot of compromises to get to a position of where we could. And Mike and I apparently took 2 very different philosophies on how we were going to do this. So let's go through. We're going to start with which CPU we chose. And that's stop doing that. No, naughty. Okay, that's that. That's it. Go away. Okay. This is my pick was Intel. Not just Intel 12th gen, which is 2 gens back from current. The reason why I picked this is and why we're going with an Alder Lake build is on Intel side. Even though this is technically a dead platform, this is a 6-core, 12-thread CPU with cooler for $111, which is, this is a bit like I had been choosing the 12100, which is a 4-core, 4-thread. Wasn't the best. This actually has hyper-threading. This actually has some heft to it, comparatively so. And you do have some room to upgrade. You can get either a higher level 12th gen part or potentially a higher level 13th or 14th gen part, which people will kind of avoid because Intel had those issues. However, why I chose this as opposed to going back to an AM4 platform is, we'll get to it when I get to my motherboard memory parts, but DDR5. Between the 2 dead platforms available right now that you can actually get some value out of, on Intel side, it's using RAM that you can take forward to new stuff. If you're going with an AM4 build, you'll be spending money on RAM that it's essentially gone. It's trying to come up with a value there. It was kind of hard. Meanwhile, Mike went the other direction, and he chose the Ryzen 5 7600, also 6-core, also 12-thread, however, significantly faster than the 12400F because it is on a newer platform, uses less power, also includes its own cooler, and
onboard graphics.
But and it's on the new platform. It's on AM5, which will allow for upgrading going forward. but the cost here is kind of, we'll see what there were trade-offs we both had to make. The 7600 just by itself is going for about $178.99. That's with a $25 promo code.
That's with the discount.
And that's a big chunk of the build right here.
That's almost a third of the build. My design philosophy is basically, what is the most annoying things to replace in a computer? Let's spend the money there if we can.
Well, also, you'll see when we get to our later parts, but the limitations we had to make choices. If you go with the 7600, well, we'll get more into that later as we get to the parts. Let's get to the motherboards. I went with a micro ATX build, which is not what everyone would choose. I went with an ASRock B760M PG Riptide. ASRock's been making some good stuff. As a motherboard, this will last you a while. However, you have some limitations. You only have one PCIe slot. You have technically you have two, but you only have one full size. You have a small, like a X4 slot down there that can, some non-graphics cards can be used in that slot. It's got all the other features though. It's got a robust VRM. It's got the blinky lights if you like the blinky lights. It's got 4 RAM slots. It's fairly generous with the USB ports too. I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then others on the headers. So yeah, limitation of the B760 platform, at least on Intel side, they didn't permit overclocking. Intel's new philosophy is we'll let you overclock everything because they realized AMD's kind of got us over a barrel there. At least I think that's their philosophy. Regardless, this chipset is what it is. Of course, you can't do any overclocking with the 12400F anyway because it's not unlocked. But even if you upgrade later, this will be a fairly viable motherboard going forward. It's just limited because it's itty bitty. That's fine. Mike went with an MSI B650S Wi-Fi. Now, one limitation on my motherboard is that one has no Wi-Fi. Mike's does. And this is a fairly bare bones board. You want to talk about it?
I just picked a board that had the capabilities that we needed. I needed an M.2 slot. I wanted decent PCI. I wanted something you could buy and go, I don't feel bad about this motherboard. It'll support future chips. It'll support a decent video card if you upgrade in that direction.
Yeah, it's got 2 M.2 slots. One of them's got a heat sink, but the other one doesn't. You can get a heat sink. It's fairly cheap. 4 RAM slots, plenty of USB. It's a no frills B650, which is kind of hard to find, to be perfectly honest. The prices on B650 are crazy, even now. I think the only other options above this are like 150. This one's 130 for this motherboard. My motherboard's fairly cheaper, but because mine is at 109. Well, it's not all that much cheaper. It's at $100. Yeah, $20 cheaper. But mine's a dead platform, technically. So this one, however, will see you going forward. While it's stripped down and no frills, if you're strictly stuck on a budget, this will work. It's got some pretty robust heat sinks on it as well, which is with AM5, one of the important aspects of the motherboard is the VRM. Because while technically AM5 can use any of the Ryzen 7000, 9000 CPUs, technically, the limitation there is the voltage and the power regulation. It needs 2 elements. It needs a good, robust set of integrated circuits to handle the voltage regulation, and it needs good heat sinks to keep those cool. And this one does have big hunks of metal that will work for helping to keep those cool. Why that matters is while the 7600 is a fairly low power 65 watt part, if you want to put, say, a 7950 in here or a 9950, a big hunk, if you want to upgrade your CPU later, If it doesn't have a good VRM with good heat sinks, it will be limited speed wise. So you have to look out for that when you're buying. If you're buying an AMD motherboard and you're looking to go, bigger, understand that power consumption is going to matter if you upgrade. A lot of the motherboard manufacturers have kind of been like, oh, what? It runs the spec, and it will. But if the VRM isn't up to snuff, those expensive CPUs you get to upgrade with won't run as fast as they should. So that's something to look out for when you're getting even, whichever one you're getting. RAM-wise, we kind of got about in the same ballpark.
No, you got 16 gig. I got 32.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah, I tried to save a little bit on mine because, well, we'll see in a second. But yeah, I got 16 gigs of DDR5, 6000 CL30. One of the nice things is that DDR5 prices have come down. That's the one of the parts that has actually gotten cheaper this year. DDR5
for $12.50 more, I got twice as much RAM.
That's true. You did get the 32 gigs. I was kind of like scraping every dollar.
Yeah. That said, I'm going to say this, I'm not going to give my price total right now. When I put this build initially together on Monday, I was literally right at our limit, and then the price has changed some.
Yeah, but it's been we're scraping on this one to get by. Still, 32 gigs, 16 gigs is the bare minimum for right now. 32 gigs is probably the acceptable standard.
And it may be over memoried, really, for a system that is basically as low power as this one is.
Yeah.
But
still,
it was a deal.
Yeah, and having room to go forward is something to consider. So don't go, if you're going to start building, don't go less than 16 gigs. If you have 16 gigs right now, 32 gigs is not bad price. It's like what? This one is $84, $85. That's not bad, and that could be a considerable upgrade for what you have right now. Let's see. Next up is our SSDs. We went about similar here. I got a Western Digital Blue. I think I used to use the same one last year too. Western Digital Blue SN50 1 terabyte, and you went with a Kingston NV2 1 terabyte. Close in the same price. I mean, there's like a $3 difference.
$3 difference. And the only reason I didn't go with the slightly cheaper Western Digital is I've had a couple bad experiences with Western Digital in the past. And I'm just like, no.
Something to be noted about both of our choices is at this price point, we talked a little bit about this last week. Both SSDs, both of these did not have onboard DRAM for buffering purposes. That means these SSDs, while they do have a 1 terabyte capacity, are going to be slower than slightly more expensive ones that have DRAM built in.
That you'll see next week, most likely.
And the thing about the DRAM, they don't really advertise it, so you have to look that up when you're looking at this price range. But just assume that any 1 terabyte SSD around $50 to $60 isn't going to have DRAM on it. That doesn't mean these drives won't work, and it doesn't mean they won't be significantly faster than old style spinning drives. And they're not going to be slow either, not compared to the other ones. The thing is, instead of having its own dedicated RAM to act as a buffer, it has to reserve some of your system RAM from the motherboard to act as a buffer. And as a result, because there is a latency in the SSD to that RAM cache and back, it's slower.
But I will say I have 16 gigs of RAM extra to do that in.
Yes, true. You do. Still, regardless, that's what you could. These are not bad parts. These are not. Oh, hey, Kingfish, thank you for the raid. Appreciate you very much. These are not bad parts. These are not parts you should avoid unless you're really concerned about speed, latency. If you want some, these aren't terrible. If you could afford it, you would want to get better. But at this price range and going in for a budget, these aren't going to kill you. And the capacity is still nice to have. Overall capacity does matter. Like, I believe you might be able to get like a 500 gigabyte that's about the same speed as it's got DRAM on it. It's faster, but you're going to have half the capacity.
Yeah.
And capacity matters. Size matters. So, yeah. And Kingston's a reliable name. Western Digital tends to be a reliable name.
I've just had a couple issues with them in the past. That's my personal bugaboo, or whatever you want to call it. It's my personal. You see this a lot in builds. Someone goes, I got burned by this brand component. I'm not using them again.
No. Now, for video cards, Mike and I went two different ways on this. My choice is actually the exact same one I made last year, and that's because of the price. This is an ASRock Challenger D Radeon RX 600 8 gigabyte card. And it is down to $190, which is about the cheapest, most viable card I could find in this price range. Now, if I'd had $30 of flex in my budget, I would have actually recommended an ARC 770 16 gigabyte card. It would perform better than this. It would have more VRAM. And that being said, if we wait about a month, we are going to have the ARC 870 and the ARC 850. And the ARC 850 is going to be going for $220, which is the same price the ARC 770 is going for right now. It's going to be faster than the ARC 770, and it's still going to have 16 gigs of RAM. So this was just this is the cheapest video card that I would get, that I would consider worth buying. But considering only $30 difference between this and the ARC cards, at the budget level, the ARC cards are a good value. Yeah, they still have some driver issues. They've worked out a lot of them.
And they're continuing to work on them.
Yeah. And were there no deals for 6650? Not this cheap. This was the rariter. This was the bare bottom, because I was scraping it to put together something at the $650 price point. It was hard. I had to scrimp wherever I could without putting together a piece of crap. But if we're coming into the holiday season, it's a little weird. If you need a card now, or now-ish, I would wait until January for the ARC 850. If you are super broke and you need something good, that ARC 850 at $220 looks really compelling. And we're probably going to see it come down closer to $200 in about a couple months, which at that price, it's going to be a freaking steal compared to everybody else. Mike's choice for a video card was nothing.
Onboard graphics.
Yeah. One of the nice things about the new generation of the Ryzen AM5 and the 7000, 8000 series is integrated graphics. You don't need a video card to run a system with those CPUs. The downside, of course, is you can't game. You can play like maybe Stardew Valley or anything, but everything else, especially productivity stuff, you're going to be just fine for. Because that CPU is the 7600 at 200, under 200, that's 178, is an excellent value for a car. Yeah. You can even overclock it to some degree if you'd like to do it manually. But
now I will say, Ryzen says you can game with this. You can do 1080p gaming. Some games they say up to 60 frames per second. Most games between 30 and 60.
Yeah. You can probably get
doing a lot of heavy lifting.
You can get some low settings, older games. You can do some stuff with the onboard graphics. Now, the reason why we split on this, Mike seems to have built his around, you can get the graphics card later. Right now, you need a system that's viable for the long term.
Yeah.
And I was like, here's a system that will function fairly well with a little bit of upgradability for the CPU, but you need to game now. So that's the two different sides of things. For some folks, gaming is not the main focus of having a functional computer. You want to do video production. You want to do other stuff. The CPU by itself is going to matter more. Even though video editing does have some, take advantage of some graphics card stuff, it can take advantage of that with the Radeon too, because the built-in Radeon that's in the RX 7600 isn't that bad, or the Ryzen 7600. Yeah.
And I'm not going to lie, part of my concept here was, hey, that new Intel card comes out in a couple of months. Maybe you look at the budget build and you go, and I got some extra Christmas money. I'll take the budget build and get that.
Someone
Intel
mentioned
card.
Why not go for one of the 8000 series AGPUs? Let me see what those look like right now. 8,000. Let's see what the prices are on those. Well, I can tell you why. The reason why immediately.
A lot of them were out of stock, I think.
Yeah. Well, not just a matter of out of stock. Let's see. I think 8600 probably be what we're looking for. 8600. Shit, no, yeah, the 8600 might have been a better call here, actually.
You know, you're right. I think when I was doing this, it was about $20 over.
Well, this would have given you back about the Ryzen 8, the Ryzen 5 8600G is going for 160. So that would have given you about $18 back.
I think the price has changed on me significantly from Monday is what happened. Is some things became cheaper, some things became more expensive. So yeah, obviously take this build with a grain of salt. Do your research. You know, this is a starting point. You say, hey, this is actually cheaper now. And
the Ryzen, the Ryzen 8000 series GPUs are a bit of a compromise, because instead of being a chiplet design with the other features, and it's got less RAM cache in it, it's a monolithic design with a built-in graphics, and the graphics that's built into the 8600G are considerably better than the ones built into the basic 7600. They're not as good as a full-on discrete graphics card, but you'll get better graphics gaming quality. You'll get something a whole lot more solid than just the built-in stuff that's in a 7600. So yeah, 8600G, it's a compromise.
Yeah. Also, you know what I think may have happened? I'm not 100% sure that when I put this processor and motherboard combo together, that I didn't have an 8600 in there, and it threw some BIOS flags. And I said, let's not have someone have to deal with BIOS. Because I know there's some motherboards that'll go, if you do this with an 8000 series chip, you can't do X, Y, and Z.
Well, in any event, I kind of, in this instance, yeah, you're right. The 8600G,
might well be a better deal.
It's not going to be quite as powerful as the 7600. But if you're going to get the system, you're looking toward long-term upgradability anyway. So this will run you along for a while, and then eventually you can swap out the CPU, add a GPU, and you'll get more, more power than you would otherwise. So those are your options this year. You either
There's also might be a minor question of resaleability. Will a 7600 go used on eBay for more than the 8600G?
Yeah, I know, but I would rather have, if I had the choice, I'd rather have the 8600G right now for the graphics right now. I mean, the used price later is nice and all, but right now kind of matters.
I will say that the price difference is not that great with the mail-in rebate.
In any event, the issue here is you either have to choose to go with an APU or with an older generation CPU, and at the 6600 is actually an older generation graphics card. Those are your choices this year for trying to build a system that will get you some gaming. That's not great this year. Those are the compromises we had to make to get to a viable price point in all this. It's not great, Bob. Let's keep on to where we're going. Now, I picked one I recommended to some viewers earlier this year. The Fractal Design Pop Air RGB ATX mid-tower case. Includes 3 fans, which is a big thing you need to look at for the budget tier. It has to include its own fans. RGB, non-RGB, doesn't matter. At this tier, you should not be going out and spending extra money on fans. Even if you're spending for $5 fans, includes 3 fans that would be at about the $5 to $7 tier in the price of the case. It's a good case. It's Fractal, so it's got some reliability behind it, and it's $60. It is an excellent deal. It even has room, if I'm remembering correctly. Let me bring this up on Newegg so I can look at the picture. If I remember correctly, this one has room. Yeah, it's got a room for a 5 1/4 drive, an optical drive. Not that many people use it, but that slot at the front, this pops open, and you can put an optical drive in there. So you can have a CD-ROM if you want with it. This is one of the few cases left that has the option for that. So tempered glass, good airflow, room for a couple for upgradability. You could add liquid cooling and all that stuff later on if you want. And $60. That's a crazy price for this, for a Fractal design. For the included, it was originally 80, and now it was originally 89. So it's really 90. It's down $30. $60 is a crazy price. This is one of the best deals I've seen for the year. Mike went with something a little more substantial because, again, he didn't have to worry about the graphics card. So he was able to go with, this is not on you, Mike. This is not your fault. And this is a decent, as a product, this is decent. But if we'd been talking about news stories this week, one of the things we would have been talking about is Gamers Nexus did a big expose this week on NZXT.
Uh-oh.
And they got busted hard for some of their less than savory practices. Remember a while back we had that story about the NZXT rent your PC forever kind of thing?
Yeah.
And I told you it was shady. I told you it was fucking shady. Well, turns out
it was really shady.
It was super duper fucking shady. And they even Gamers Nexus was able to sign up for the service without identity verification. Meaning they just used a credit card and were able to get someone's yeah.
Ooh. That's too bad.
Jay's 2 cents interviewing the CTO Raritor, that was also a big oof. I don't know what the hell Jay was thinking either. That was super oof. So I cannot recommend it. You didn't know this?
No,
I can't recommend NZXT parts this year because as a company that just
okay. I will say really, really nice case.
Yeah.
Includes 4 fans.
Does.
Lots of room for expansion in there.
Yeah. It's got that nice display. Bad fucking company. There are comparable cases in this price range. This is about $130 price range. So the case, honestly, in this one isn't all that cheap. So with $130, you've got some room to play around in.
Yeah.
But
in fact, this is a place where you could say, I'm not going to drop 130 on a case. I'm going to drop 80 on a case and bump up some of the stuff in here for elsewhere.
I do not know what Jay was. People in the channel what would Jay? I do not know what Jay was thinking of interviewing the CEO of NZXT after all that, because they put out a statement that went over badly, and Gamers Nexus replied to their reply, and big oof, Jay, big oof there, bro. What? I don't know. I don't understand. What the fuck? Final part here is power supply. I went same one I recommended last year.
And it's a solid power supply.
Thermaltake Smart 780 plus certified. It is 80 plus, period. No bronze, silver, gold, it is just 80% efficiency, which is anything
and not modular.
Not modular. No. At this price point, if you want something that would provide power for the wattage, you're going to have to deal with quite often. They're not going to be modular. They're cheap. They're effective. It's just a little harder to cable manage is the big takeaway there. Mine went for a grand total of $55 for a 700 watt power supply, and Thermaltake is a relatively reputable company. So, and there haven't been any reports of this one blowing the hell up. It's just limited and non-modular. So, but for 700 watts for $55, a good deal. You went with Rosewell for 850 watt because you had a little more room. You didn't go with the graphics card. Yours was $80. Rosewell is Newegg's house brand. Yours is 80 plus gold, and yours is modular.
Yep.
So
again, one of my design considerations is how much of a pain is it to replace something. And saying, I'm tired of this power supply having these extra cables kicking around and going from a non-modular power supply to a modular power supply is annoying. So having one in there from day one, very useful.
So our grand totals this year, mine works out to $657.74. That parts had shifted in price since when I put this together, but $657.74. Mike's came out to about $665, but if you replace the 7600 with an 8600G, Mike will actually be under budget. Mm-hmm. We'll come in just under the budget for this.
And you know, maybe you go with a different case.
Yeah. I mean, I gotta say, no. That Fractal Pop G is just, that is such a good deal. $60, full size case, 3 fans.
Yeah,
that's a hell of a good that for a starting.
It honestly is. If I went with that case, and swapped out that power supply, so that'd be $70, $80, $90 off. So suddenly I've got $90 to play with on mine.
Yeah.
And that would be, I don't even know because you can't get a video card for $90.
Right. That, which is ridiculous, but yeah, you can't get a viable video card for $90.
I would probably throw a better motherboard in there. Throw that $90 on the motherboard.
Yeah, that's probably a better place to put it if we're going to go with an APU build.
Because you can get a great deal additional motherboard for $90.
So
and a motherboard is basically top of the list for most annoying thing to replace because you're basically gutting the computer.
So the takeaway this year is prices are very disappointing if you're trying to build on a budget. Hopefully next year when we get to December, I'm hoping Battle Mage will put some downward pressure on some prices. Maybe the ARC A770 next year will be a good around $150 for a graphics card, if it's still available for like an ARC A770. If they still have those available by next December, I expect they'll be breaking under $200, probably closer to $150. That'll be an amazing budget card, if nothing else.
Yeah.
But
one other additional note I'll make about my build.
Yeah.
As we said, an 850 watt power supply. The estimated wattage of this build is 175 watts.
Oh yeah, so you got room. You got room to drop a very beefy graphics card into there later. But yeah, overall, it's been disappointing. Especially if I want to say, for me, I am an enthusiast. I like seeing people be able to get into this, not just buying a PC off the rack, but also building them. That's as a hobby. And this has probably been the worst stretch of time for PC enthusiast market. Just absolutely terrible. Graphics cards prices ever since 2020, ever since 2019, 2020, graphics card prices have pretty much destroyed the hobby.
And it's also, I'm going to say it's not just the prices. It's at least one manufacturer's insistence on being first and drawing so much damn power as to be ridiculous.
Yeah. It's just it. there's an inflation on prices. I'm scared of what's going to happen after the AI crash. I don't know what NVIDIA is going to look like then. In general, we lost Pat Gelsinger. We'll talk about this probably at some point, but Intel CEO is out on his butt, which while Battlemage is being released, I don't know what that means going forward for the future of the ARC program, of the ARC graphics card, because that was started. Well, that wasn't started. Regardless, I don't know what that's going to look like going forward.
This may sound mean-spirited.
I'm
kind of okay with a CEO losing their job for Christmas rather than a bunch of workers.
Yeah, I mean, it's rough though, Mike. He had to go home with only $10 million severance. So I don't know how he's gonna make ends meet this year.
I don't have any sympathy.
Like he's practically Bob Cratchit.
He's in second place right now, though, on my lack of sympathy for CEOs. No guesses on who's first.
Okay. No, but he's practically Bob Cratchit, Mike. He's practically Bob Cratchit.
How dare you compare him to one of Kermit the Frog's best roles?
We don't know if Tiny Tim will live. He's only got $10 million, Mike. How can he make ends meet on $10 million? So we'll see, but yeah, it's this is not a great time. Honestly, it's weird, but consoles are more viable than ever because they have less issues. They are, in some instances, better value for the money.
Yeah,
you can get faster.
We even talked earlier this year that we might not do the budget build because the console would be a better deal, and that's still a good argument.
I mean, the PS5 right now. Let's see, PS5 is going for the PS5 Digital Edition $375. There's probably going to be some better sales closer to Christmas itself. So it's already for $375. Or $425 if you want to get the disc version. That might be a better idea. I hate saying it, but some very bad choices from the industry are wrecking the PC market. It's a mess. Anyway, let's get to your questions tonight. We got a few here. First is from Diego, and this is actually a really good question. Hey, Nash and Mike, almost done with my new PC, R7 5700X3D. Gigabyte B550MK, RTX 380, 32 gigabyte Corsair Vengeance DDR4. And I'm currently awaiting my RAM and SSD to arrive from Amazon since it's been a while since I built a new PC and my RAM is supposed to arrive tomorrow. I wanted to ask, what are some BIOS settings and maybe some Windows settings I should look for and be aware of? Good question.
Yeah. So I think on the BIOS, the first thing you're going to want to do is let it do its self-timing and check it out. Right. And after that, maybe you go in and take a look to see if you need to change anything.
Well,
I don't know that you need to overclock.
Not overclock. The main thing with modern systems, if you're building one, or sometimes even if you're buying them, what you need to check in your computer's BIOS is to see if either XMP or DOCP or something like that has been turned on. When you buy RAM right now, it will say on the box the RAM has, let's say, PC 3200 for DDR4 or PC 6000 for DDR5. That speed is megahertz. It's like 6000 megahertz. That's what the RAM is rated for. But there's a big old asterisk there.
Yep.
Technically, all RAM, all DDR RAM, to reach those speeds that are advertised on the box, technically they're overclocked because you cannot reach those speeds without turning on a setting in your BIOS. That's XMP Extreme Memory Profile on Intel, and it's called, it might be listed under DOCP. I forget what AMD called theirs. Someone in the channel probably knows. But the limit there is it actually turns on a specially assigned overclock that the RAM, it's programmed into the RAM. It's a little bit of flash memory on the RAM stick itself that says how fast the RAM is capable of being. They've tested it at that speed. It should be okay at that speed. But it is technically an overclock. Without turning on, that's Expo. There it is. That's AMD Expo. Without turning on that setting, your RAM is going to be running at the DDR stock speed. And it, depending on, DDR4 is like 2400 megahertz. And DDR5 is something like 4300 or something. It's a very much slower RAM.
It can be noticeable.
Yeah, much slower than what you're paying for. So we got to look in your motherboard's manual and find where to turn that setting on, because that is crucial. If you have to, if you don't, you're not going to get the performance you're expecting out of your computer, and it's just gonna suck. Any other things keep in mind? More of an issue with AM5 is context restore. This is also under memory as well. DDR5 runs a lot more on the bleeding edge, weirdly enough. It's stable and it's good, but to get that stability, the computer is making a lot of calculations when the system starts up to handle your RAM at the speed it's supposed to be handled at. And a lot of the time with context restore, it's like, these settings seem good and I've checked them out. All right, we're going to stick with these settings. With context restore turned off, it means your computer, every time you boot it up, takes a lot longer to test the RAM over and find a stable setting. Not a bunch longer, but it can be up like 10, 15 seconds. It's annoying. So
I'll say for some of us old school people, that's nothing.
Yeah.
I'm going to just seg into a tiny bit of story time. Mm-hmm. When I was at university in computer science, you would log into your account on one of the computers. You would leave the room, go down 2 flights of stairs to the soda machine in the basement, get a soda, go upstairs, look through the little window, drink your soda, look through the little window, go down, get a second soda, come back up, and your computer would be ready for you to do stuff. It's finished logging you in.
The old days. As far as other Windows settings, Windows 11, there isn't any real Windows setting you need to go in and change and turn on. Windows 10 has a couple, like...
Yeah. I'll say, I don't know of any Windows 11. I'm sure when we switch over to work to Windows 11, I will learn more.
But for Windows 10, there are a couple of settings for graphic, like there's a GPU setting you have to turn on, or else if you don't, certain DLSS frame generation won't work unless you turn on, I forget what the setting is. There's a certain setting in Windows you have to turn on. But if you're using Windows 11, you've got no problems to worry about. That everything will be already sorted and taken care of.
It should be auto detecting a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. You're in much better shape. So I don't think there's a lot of Windows settings you'll have to change. Mainly the main one is turning on the XMP / Expo / DOCP. It's turning on that setting. Look in your motherboard to see how to turn. That's how you get the proper speed out of your RAM. So, next one is from Kat. She says, "Hey guys, I have mostly finished my large electronics tariff panic buying. But something on my to-do list as streaming has gone to shit, I have kept putting off is trying to set up a home media server. Nash set up one recently, set up and reset up over the years. I was wondering what hardware you recommend for getting started. Mentioned the 12 gigabyte drive while I was writing this. Storage part's probably settled, but I don't know what about to get it on the network. Okay. First of all, let me recommend the best, most economical option for a media server is an old PC. If you have one that's like 5-6 years old, still functional, no issues on it, that is your best bet. In fact, if you have an Intel one, that's even better. I'll explain why in a second.
And the reason why for this is because a media server, unless you are streaming to like 12 different devices at once, a little bit of exaggeration,
Mm.
isn't doing a huge amount of heavy lifting.
Yeah.
So you can use older hardware just fine.
Yeah. If you have a PC you haven't been using, or just one that's just set aside, those make the best media servers. They might not be the most power efficient, but they are the best, and particularly the Intel ones, because of what was it called? It's a transcoding QuickSync. That's the feature. Intel has long established with their integrated graphics in the CPUs a function called QuickSync that allows it to re-encode media very quickly when used as a media server. And this matters because one of the functions of a media server is, let's say you're playing it on your tablet. You want to watch something on your tablet while you're out, just like you're sitting in the porch. You want to watch something. Your tablet, let's say, has a maximum screen resolution of 720p or 1080, maybe even 1080p.
Yeah. And doesn't have a lot of video codecs.
Yeah. So whatever, if you want to watch that in a more efficient manner, or if the media you have is, let's say, in X265 or H265, which is a much more efficient codec that allows you to save files at a smaller size, but not every device supports it. What transcoding allows it to do is it will, on the fly, re-encode that video file in a format that whatever device you're trying to access can read it. That's where having that Intel CPU comes in handy. The AMD CPUs, even the ones that have integrated graphics, just haven't been on the ball with this as the Intel ones have.
Now,
so
that said, you may not notice the difference.
Yeah, you might.
Other than startup.
Yeah. Regardless, an old PC, even an old laptop, is a great option for a media server, efficient, a cheap option to have one. Now, if you wanted to get one yourself and you want to spend some money, there are some other options. There are a couple of NAS, network attached storage, that actually have an operating system built into them that can run things like Plex and what's that other one? Starts with a K. It's a alternative to Plex. I have so many things in my head to remember. There are a couple of it will run this because it's running a version of Linux. And I would honestly say another thing, no matter what you get for the system, if you're going to use an old CPU, old computer, run a copy of Linux Mint on it for the server, because I will tell you that's going to be cheaper and you'll get better performance on an old computer using Linux. And it can do everything you need to do. You might be a little bit of a learning curve, but it will do everything just fine.
Yeah.
Another thing about using an old computer, it's going to be more robust than, say, picking up something like a Raspberry Pi or, there's another dedicated server, tiny PC. I think I've forgotten. I put it aside and I forgot about it. Yes, Linux is free. It's compared to having to buy a new Windows license or try to use an old Windows 10 install or something. Linux is free. It's going to have security updates forever. You don't have to worry about replacing it. It'll just update and you'll be fine. That's my main recommendation is an old PC. The transcoding things becomes a little bit of an issue if you use something like a Raspberry Pi or a Banana Pi or any of those micro ARM options. They'll do all the same stuff. And what you do is you'd get one of those and you'd get a USB interface for the drive and just attach it to the Raspberry Pi via USB connector. That's viable. It will work. It's just going to be slower on the transcoding. And it will have, it won't have as much power. It will be more power efficient. I will tell you, running a Raspberry Pi as your media server is much more power efficient than running even an old laptop. Well, actually, it depends on the laptop, but still, it's very power efficient. So you won't notice it on your bill as much. But then again, a modern computer, if you're running it and you're telling it to go into low power mode when it's not being in use and just, park the drives and clock down the CPU. That's not going to be drawing that much power when it's idling either. Still, Raspberry Pi is always more power efficient. But my main recommendation is for setting up a home media server is Linux. Plex may be your liking. What is the alternative? What's the Plex alternative? I know it. I freaking know it. Emby. That's the one. EMBY.
That begins with a K.
Yes, that begins with a K. I am now AI. Just a small side note. Every time OpenAI comes up with a new iteration of ChatGPT, Ed Zitron, who's a very good journalist, he's on Blue Sky, you should follow him. He covers a lot of the stuff. He runs a little test. He asks it to name all the states with the letter R.
And it always gets them wrong.
Always. Every iteration. GPT 3, 4, 4.5, now GPT 5. All of them.
And part of this is because it's learning from itself, and it's not learning.
Yeah. Did you know Wyoming has an R in it? Well, apparently our AI overlords think it does. Yeah, Raritor, that's the other one. Jellyfin is an open source alternative to Plex. So that's one you might want to think about as well. Plex can be... I'm kind of embedded into the ecosystem. I did that myself because I've been using it for well over 10 years now. But there are options. Kodi, that's the one I was thinking of. That's the one that starts with a K. Kodi, Kodi. I knew there was one that started with a K. I knew it. I'm not crazy. Well, about this issue, but yeah. So yeah, that's my recommendations there, media server wise. Last one this week is from Lord of the Things. Hi, Nash, Mike, and associated felines or other pets. I'm trying to figure out if I should upgrade my system in light of the oncoming fucking next year. But tech stuff is like really trying to read cuneiform for me. My one requirement is run Final Fantasy XIV really, really good. And while I do exceed the system requirements, my machine can't quite manage the highest settings without frame rate drops, especially when the game is trying to load a lot of environmental assets. That's something to note here. We got an AMD Ryzen 9 5900X 12 core, RTX 3060, a 2 terabyte SSD. My uneducated guess is the GPU would be the best place to look for an upgrade. Yes. Like I said, I'm a bit of an absolute rube. Fortunately, I could blow a bit of cash in order to future-proof, so don't be afraid to recommend something a bit more expensive. Okay. I don't like recommending graphics cards over $700. As a rule, I don't like doing it. There are two cards around here. One, it's a matter of DLSS, ray tracing, and what matters to you. If you really super care about ray tracing, then you're gonna want to lean toward NVIDIA. And that means at the $500 level, 4060 Ti, 16 gig. Oh, that's come down a bit. That's the 8 gig. That's why it hasn't come down a bit. No, it has come down a bit. Yeah, there's one for 400. So let me see about the 4070. RTX 4070. That still has, that's 12 gigs of RAM. And that's right at 529 for an RTX 4070. Okay. So you're between two options. RTX 4070 12 gig or Radeon RX 7800 XT for 16 gig. Those are both about the $500 mark. And Rurutu is right. The 7900 XT is only at $650. So there's an option too if you want to push a little further past.
And it's a solid card at $650 too. It is like I think when I was comparing numbers, it's 100%. You know that thing we plug in two video cards and it says which one's better, and it's 100-something% better. How they calculate that, I don't know, but than what you have.
The 7900 XT for $650 is a solid bargain. I think it's got 16 gigs of RAM, if I'm not mistaken.
You can get one with 20.
Oh, you can say 7900. Is that the XT or the XTX?
XT.
No, 24. XT has 24 gigs of RAM. That's a lot.
That's the $750 version.
No, there's one $670. RX 7900 XT Ultra, 24 gigs of RAM.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the XFX Speedster Merc 310. It's a RTX, RX 7900 XT, 20 gigs of RAM, going for 623. Oh, wow, that's only $623. That's not bad. Definitely worthwhile there. More video RAM is future-proofing because as time goes on, video textures, that's the you have your wireframe in a game. You have all the objects have like this framework. And then to make them look like people and things, they lay a texture over it. And the texture files are what take a lot of space because the more detailed the texture, the bigger the file. Yep. And the card needs to have fast access to those textures in order to make the world look contiguous and not screwy and not have textures popping over the place. So more RAM means it can hold bigger textures in memory to access them faster, and you get faster performance. So having 20 gigs of RAM as an option to give me let's see, what does my 4080 have? I think I only have 16. I think I'm only 16? Yeah, I only got 16 gigs of RAM. And that's a much more expensive card, by the way. Now so a lot of video RAM is good. Oh yes, that's true, Rurutu. You might want to check your power supply. Let me see, 7900 XT. What does that require? Power supply requires minimum is 750 watts. So make sure you have a power supply that can handle 750 watts or higher to run some of these more powerful graphics cards. Just on raw oomph and rasterization, which is the actual drawing of things, Radeon tends to be a little bit faster. And for the money, a lot faster. For $630, it's actually gonna be much faster than anything you can get comparably on the NVIDIA side. So why isn't everybody buying Radeon? Well, one issue is DLSS. Both cards have the same feature set, which is they both have ray tracing ability. They both have dynamic resolution scaling to allow for faster frame rates. They both have frame generation, which adds in between frames to overall smooth out your experience. The difference is NVIDIA's implementation of it has proven to be a lot more acceptable, looks better. Like it depends. It's got better overall appearance to it. And it's closed source, meaning if you want to use NVIDIA's RTX and DLSS and their ray tracing stuff, you have to get an NVIDIA card. AMD has an open source version that any graphics card can access them, even NVIDIA cards and Intel cards. But AMD cards can't utilize DLSS. They can't utilize those functions. So it does have a more limited, and their ray tracing is not overall as powerful as NVIDIA because NVIDIA has dedicated parts of the CPU designed to do the ray tracing function. Brief explanation of what ray tracing is. We talk about it a lot. Essentially, it's a computer pretending it's modeling light as if it were behaving from a real light source. Like it models a light bulb, and then the rays of light that extend from the light bulb supposedly interact with surfaces in the game world as though they were real rays of light. Instead of having to fake it, like it used to be if you ever saw a mirror in a video game, that wasn't an actual reflection. They build a whole other room in the game that's identical, but backwards to the room you're in. And you look into it, and that's the mirror. And that takes a lot more resources. It's a lot harder to deal with. Ray tracing, in theory, allows you to just use light. And you don't have to work with those stupid tricks to try to make the game work the way you want, to design the game the way you want it. In practice...
There's another thing I would possibly recommend here as a potential upgrade. And that, well, the question says a 2 terabyte SSD. I'm curious, is that a SSD or is that an M.2? And if it's not an M.2, I would suggest maybe getting an M.2 and transferring the game there, because that will also speed things up dramatically.
Well,
potentially.
NVIDIA's ray tracing implementation, they actually set aside part of the silicon to calculate the ray tracing. AMD just uses the general silicon, any part of the CPU that's available to do work. So it's not specialized. That allows it to be open source implementation. Trouble is, it's not as good or as fast as calculating as NVIDIA's specialized implementation has been. But the question begins, how much does ray tracing matter to you? And the visual difference, it's honestly not that much. It all depends. Sometimes it's bigger, sometimes it's not. And the internet's being crazy tonight, and I hate it. Hello. Charlie's back there being Charlie. So the AMD has got more RAM, faster overall basic drawing, and it does have access to stuff like DLSS and not DLSS, to frame generation and FSR for resolution scaling and whatnot. It's just not as good an implementation as NVIDIA's. For a game like Final Fantasy XIV, 7900 XT is kind of overkill, but you might want overkill at that point.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you're looking for like maybe a 4070 or 4070, what's 4070 Ti? What's 4070 Ti go for? 4070 Ti Super. What's that going for? Ooh, that's up at $800. Nope. 4070 Super is around 4070 Super is around 630. So same price as 7900 XT. So yeah, that's on you. That's what matters more to you. Overall, for the same money, the 4070 Super is going to be a little slower than a 7900 XT for the same money. But the ray tracing will be better on the 4070. But if you can't run things as fast, even with the ray tracing turned on, it's a trade-off kind of thing. That's the decision you have to make. Personally, if I was in that position, the reason I stick with NVIDIA is because of streaming. There is an encoder that, again, this is proprietary, only works with NVIDIA GPUs, and it's called NVENC. And it allows the GPU to use a small amount of its overall power while I'm doing everything else to encode my video signal. And it does so in a way that looks better at lower bandwidths. So I get a better picture overall when I stream to you folks, especially when I'm doing games that have a lot of motion and stuff going on. I get a better overall picture quality going out, and that's only available on NVIDIA graphics cards. AMD is comparable, but not as good. So that's why I went with that. Also, mine has double encoders. I was trying to encode to YouTube at the same time, but YouTube's being a pain in the butt. Anyway, that's why I went with NVIDIA. If I wasn't relying on this for that, the 7900 XT looks like a hell of a deal. Like 20 gigs of RAM on that. That's going to last you a good long time. Holy crap. That's a beast of a graphics card.
Yeah.
All right, folks. That's going to wrap it up.
Nash, we did have one other question.
What's that?
And it's from me because I don't remember the name of the product.
What?
What is the product that you get to put on the AM5 chip to keep the thermal paste, whatever, from getting down on those little components?
There are a couple of them. CPU Guard is CPU Guard's one from Thermaltake. I recommended one to you a while back, though.
Yeah, I just don't remember what it was.
Let me send that to you.
Because I see a Noctua thermal paste guard, and I'm just like, was that it? I don't remember.
That's an option, but yeah, this. It is $15, and it comes with a contact frame, which you're not going to want to use. But it's got this nice silicon rubber CPU guard on it that is I can't get separately, but it's freaking bulletproof. I've been so happy with this thing. Let me send you I'll show everybody on stream in a second. I'll send you the link to it right here. I was messing around with the contact frame just to try to get some better temperatures. It didn't really make any difference. But this little thingy here, it's a little gasket that you put on your AM5 CPU to go in those little notches that they decided to put in the heatsink that look very futuristic and high tech, and they are just the thermal paste clogs into them. So you put this little gasket on it, and you don't need to use the contact frame to use the gasket. I've got it on mine right now without the contact frame. And
yeah, the contact frame seems like it's a bit unnecessary for the AMDs because they didn't have the buckling the way that the Intel chips did.
You ain't got to worry about the contact frame. Just get you get the kit and use the gasket. I can't find a gasket like this by itself. I've had this one. I've used it. It's great for $15. It might be a little pricey, but it's going to last forever. The problem with the Noctua ones is they're plastic and they're flimsy. The Thermaltake ones are foam, so they're also kind of flimsy and they tear. This one is silicon rubber. It's going to last for a good long while. I've had good experience with it. So yeah, that's what I would recommend for you, because I know you're about to build yours very soon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. That's going to do it for this week. We'll be back next week, 9 p.m. Eastern, Saturday. Send your tech questions to request@radiodeadair.com or put them in the YouTube comments. We're going to have our mainstream build guide next week. Hope to see you here. Meanwhile, for Mike and myself, we'll see you next time.